My name is Marcus, and for 12 years, I was known on the streets of South Central as Ghost, the rolling 60s CRIP shooter who never missed. I'm about to tell you something that will shake you to your core. In my time banging for the 6 Neo, I participated in over 200 drive-by shooting. 200 times I pulled that trigger. 200 times I watched lives change forever. But here's what's going to blow your mind. I'm still alive to tell this story. In a game where shooters don't usually live past 25, I made it out at 28. How? Because the last drive-by I did changed everything. The target wasn't who I thought it was. When I saw who was really in that car, when I realized what I had done, my whole world collapsed. If you think you know how gang life really works, if you think you understand what it means to survive in South Central, you're about to learn the truth that nobody talks about. Before I continue, let me be crystal clear about something. I'm not here to glorify this life. I'm here to warn you, to show you the reality behind the movies and the music. For 12 years, the streets between Slauson and Florence, from Western to Normandy, were my hunting ground. I knew every alley, every corner, every spot where enemies might be hiding. The rolling 60s neighborhood Crips were my family, my identity, my everything. I was what they call a shooter, the guy they called when someone needed to be handled. I carried that blue flag with pride, threw up the 6 Neo with my hands, and believed I was untouchable. I thought I was a soldier in a war that mattered. I was wrong about everything. The life I'm about to describe to you isn't glamorous. It's not like the movie. It's pure hell disguised as brotherhood, and it almost cost me everything I ever loved. This is my testimony, my warning, and maybe my redemption. I grew up on 62nd and Western, right in the heart of rolling 60s territory. My grandmother raised me after my mother died from an overdose when I was 8. Grandma worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices downtown during the day and stocking shelves at the grocery store at night. She tried her best, but the streets were calling louder than her prayers. Our neighborhood wasn't always CRIP territory. I remember when I was little, it was just a regular black neighborhood where families tried to make it. But by the time I turned 13, everything had changed. The crack epidemic hit hard, and with it came the territorial wars. Blue bandanas started appearing everywhere. The older boys on my block were throwing up C's with their hands and talking about neighborhood love. They had money, respect, and most importantly, they had each other's backs. When you're a skinny kid with no father and a grandmother working herself to death, that brotherhood looks like salvation. I had no idea it was actually a death sentence with a blue uniform. Everything changed the summer I turned 14. I was walking home from the corner store when I heard the gunshots. Pop, 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 pop. 4 quick shots that echoed through the neighborhood like thunder. I hit the ground like everyone else, but when I looked up, I saw something that would change my life forever. There was Big Mike, one of the older rolling 60s, standing over a rival gang member who had been caught slipping in our territory. The rival was bleeding, crying, begging for his life. But what struck me wasn't the violence. It was the respect in everyone's eyes when they looked at Big Mike. He was feared, he was powerful, and most importantly, he was protected. Nobody messed with Big Mike or his family. That night, Big Mike approached me. "Young blood," he said. "You got heart. I saw you didn't run when them shots went off. You want to be somebody in this neighborhood? You want to make sure your grandma never has to worry about money again?" I was 14 years old, scared, angry, and desperate to belong somewhere. When he handed me that blue bandana, it felt like he was handing me a new identity, a new family, a new life. I had no idea he was actually handing me a loaded gun pointed at my own future. My initiation into the rolling 60s happened on a hot August night in 1995. They called it getting jumped in. 6 members of the set would beat you down for 60 seconds straight. If you stayed on your feet, if you fought back, if you showed heart, you were in. If you curled up in a ball or tried to run, you were out forever. I remember standing in that alley behind the liquor store on Crenshaw, surrounded by faces I had looked up to for months. Big Mike gave the signal, and suddenly fists and feet were coming from everywhere. My nose broke in the first 10 seconds. Blood filled my mouth. My vision blurred, but I kept swinging. I kept fighting. When those 60 seconds were up, I was still standing. Barely, but standing. That's when they handed me my first gun, a .38 Special with the serial numbers filed off. "This is your new best friend," Big Mike told me. "It's going to keep you alive, and it's going to make you respected. But remember, once you pull that trigger for the set, there's no going back. You're 6-0 for life, cuz." Blood in, blood out. I was 15 years old, holding a gun, surrounded by my new brothers, and I felt invincible. I thought I had found my purpose. I had no idea I had just signed my own death warrant. My first drive-by happened 3 weeks after my initiation. Word came down that some Hoover criminals had been spotted on our turf, disrespecting the neighborhood. Big Mike pulled me aside and said it was time to prove myself. "You ready to put in work for the set?" he asked. My heart was pounding, but I nodded. We piled into a stolen Honda Civic, 4 of us, all armed, all ready to defend our territory. I was in the passenger seat, gun in my lap, trying to look calm while my insides were screaming. We drove slowly through Hoover territory until we spotted them. 3 guys in orange, standing on the corner like they owned the place. "There they go," Big Mike whispered. "Light them up." The car slowed down. I rolled down my window, raised my gun, and for the first time in my life, I aimed at another human being with the intent to kill. The sound of gunfire was deafening. The muzzle flash lit up the night. I saw bodies hit the ground, saw people screaming and running. As we sped away, my ears were ringing, my hands were shaking, but the other guys were celebrating. "Good work, little homie," Big Mike said. "You're officially a shooter now." I should have felt sick. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt powerful. That was my first mistake of many. After that first shooting, everything changed. Word spread quickly through South Central that the Rolling 60s had a new young shooter who wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. My reputation grew with every drive-by, every retaliation, every time I proved my loyalty to the set. By the time I was 17, I had participated in over 50 shootings. I kept count in a notebook hidden under my mattress. Dates, locations, targets. It became like a sick game to me. The police knew my name. Rival gangs had put a price on my head, but in my neighborhood, I was untouchable. I had money from drug sales, respect from the community, and the protection of one of the most feared sets in Los Angeles. My grandmother begged me to stop. She would cry and pray over me every night, asking God to bring back the sweet boy she had raised. But I was too deep in the life to listen. The streets had changed me into something I didn't even recognize. I was no longer Marcus. I was Ghost, the Rolling 60s shooter who never missed his target. What I didn't realize was that every bullet I fired was also aimed at my own soul, slowly killing the person I used to be. Being a recognized shooter for the Rolling 60s meant I was always on call, day or night, if there was beef with rivals, if someone disrespected the set. If retaliation was needed, my phone would ring. "Ghost, we need you," and I would drop everything. I lived in a constant state of hypervigilance, always watching my back, always ready to draw my weapon, always expecting the next attack. Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake listening for footsteps, for car engines slowing down outside my window, for the sound of guns being cocked. Paranoia became my closest companion. I started using drugs to calm my nerves. First weed, then pills, then harder stuff. The same poison we were selling in the community. I was putting into my own body, but the money was good, and the respect was addictive. I was making more in a week than my grandmother made in a month. I bought her a new car, paid off her bills, made sure she never wanted for anything. In my twisted mind, I was taking care of my family. I was being a man. What I didn't understand was that every day I stayed in the life, every day I carried that gun, I was putting her in more danger. Because in the gang world, family is never off limits. South Central in the late 90s was like a war zone, divided by invisible lines that could get you killed if you crossed them. As a Rolling 60s shooter, I had to know every boundary, every alliance, every beef that was active. Our main enemies were the 8-tray gangster Crips, the Hoover criminal, and, of course, any blood set that dared to step foot in our territory. The rivalry wasn't just about colors or neighborhood pride. It was about money, respect, and survival. Drug corners were worth killing for. A sign of disrespect could start a war that lasted years. I remember one beef that started because a Hoover criminal threw up his set in our territory. That single hand gesture led to a war that claimed over 20 lives in 6 months. I was responsible for at least 5 of those deaths. Each retaliation led to another retaliation. Each funeral led to more anger, more violence, more death. We were trapped in a cycle that none of us knew how to break. The crazy part was, half the time we were shooting at guys who looked just like us, who came from the same broken homes, who were just trying to survive in the same impossible circumstances. But when you're deep in the life, you don't see the humanity in your enemies. You only see target. By my 5th year as a shooter, I had developed a reputation that both protected and haunted me. Other sets knew my name, my car, my patterns. I had to constantly change my routine, switch vehicles, vary my routes. The stress was eating me alive. I couldn't show weakness. In the gang world, fear is a luxury you can't afford. One night, I got a call that would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty. Big Mike's voice was urgent. "Ghost, we got a problem. Word is that some 8 Trey fools are planning to hit one of our young homies. We need to strike first. Send a message." He gave me an address in enemy territory and told me to handle it. No questions asked, no hesitation allowed. This was what I had trained for, what I was known for. As I loaded my gun and headed out into the night, I felt that familiar mix of adrenaline and dread. But something was different this time. Something in Big Mike's voice. Something about the way he avoided eye contact when he gave me the address. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I did what I always did. I followed orders without thinking about the consequences. I drove through South Central that night with death on my mind. The address Big Mike gave me was deep in 8 Trey territory, a place where rolling 60s were shoot on sight. I parked 3 blocks away and walked through the shadows, gun tucked in my waistband, hood up, ready for war. The house was a small single-story with bars on the windows and a chain-link fence around the yard. I could see movement inside, shadows passing by the window. According to Big Mike, this was where the 8 Trey shooters were planning their attack on our young homie. My job was simple: eliminate the threat before they could act. I positioned myself across the street, behind a parked car, and waited. At exactly midnight, just like Big Mike said they would, 3 figures emerged from the house. They were dressed in dark clothes, moving with purpose, clearly up to no good. I raised my gun, aimed carefully, and prepared to fire. But then, something made me hesitate. One of the figures looked familiar, the way he walked, the way he held his shoulders. My finger was on the trigger, ready to squeeze, when the streetlight hit his face. That's when my world exploded. The target wasn't an 8 Trey shooter. It was my own cousin Jerome, Big Mike's nephew, walking with 2 other rolling 60s members. In that moment, with my gun aimed at my own cousin, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't a mission to stop enemy shooters. This was a setup. Big Mike had sent me to kill his own nephew, my own family, and make it look like an 8 Trey hit. But why? The answer hit me like a physical blow. Jerome had been talking about getting out of the life, about testifying against some of the older members in exchange for protection. He knew too much about the set's operations, about murders we had committed, about money we had stolen. He was a liability that Big Mike needed eliminated, but he couldn't do it himself. So he sent me, the loyal shooter who never asked questions, to pull the trigger on my own blood. I lowered my gun, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I watched Jerome and the others get into a car and drive away, completely unaware of how close they had come to death. As I sat there in the darkness, I realized that everything I believed about loyalty, about brotherhood, about the set being my family, was a lie. Big Mike was willing to sacrifice anyone, even his own nephew, even me, to protect himself. I was not a soldier in his army. I was a disposable weapon that he pointed at anyone who threatened his power. That night changed everything for me. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with the implications of what had almost happened. How many other enemies had I killed who were actually just inconvenient witnesses? How many times had Big Mike used me as his personal executioner while pretending it was for the good of the set? I thought about all the drive-bys, all the bodies, all the families destroyed by my bullets. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of what I had done. When I got home, my grandmother was waiting up for me, like she always did. She took one look at my face and knew something had changed. "Baby," she said, "you look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed at the irony. I was the ghost of the boy I used to be, haunting the killer I had become. That night, I told her everything, about the shootings, about the setup, about the realization that I had been nothing more than a tool for someone else's agenda. She held me while I cried, for the first time since I was a child. "It's not too late," she whispered. "It's never too late to come home." See, but I knew it wasn't that simple. You don't just walk away from the rolling 60s. You don't just quit being a shooter. The only way out was death, yours or theirs. The next few weeks were the most dangerous of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal, while secretly planning my escape from the only life I had known for 7 years. I couldn't trust anyone in the set. If Big Mike was willing to have his own nephew killed, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate me if he suspected I was planning to leave. I started reaching out to old contacts, people who had successfully gotten out of the gang life. Most of them had either moved far away or were dead, but I found a few who were willing to help. There was a program run by former gang members who helped people transition out of the life. They could provide new identities, relocation assistance, and most importantly, protection from retaliation. But first, I had to survive long enough to make it to them. I began varying my routines even more, staying away from known gang hangouts, and most importantly, I stopped taking calls for drive-bys. When Big Mike asked why I wasn't available, I told him I was laying low because I thought the police were watching me. It was partially true. They were always watching known shooters. But the real reason was that I couldn't pull that trigger anymore. Every time I looked down the barrel of my gun, I saw Jerome's face, and I remembered how close I had come to destroying my own family. 3 weeks after the setup, Big Mike called me with what he said would be my last job for a while. "After this, you can take a vacation. Lay low for a few months," he promised. The target was supposedly a blood from the bounty hunter set, who had been seen selling drugs on our corner. It should have been routine: find him, eliminate him, send a message to anyone else thinking about disrespecting our territory. But I had learned not to trust anything Big Mike told me. I agreed to take the job, but this time I did my own reconnaissance first. I spent 3 days watching the target, learning his patterns, confirming his identity. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The target wasn't a bounty hunter blood. He was a rolling 60s member who had been asking questions about missing money from drug sales. He was getting too close to discovering that Big Mike had been skimming profits from the set's operation. Once again, Big Mike was using me to eliminate a problem while making it look like gang warfare. This was my breaking point. I realized that I had probably killed innocent people before, people whose only crime was knowing too much or asking too many questions. I had been Big Mike's personal assassin, and I had been too blind to see it. That night, I made a decision that would either save my life or end it. I was done being someone else's weapon. Instead of carrying out the hit, I decided to confront Big Mike directly. I knew it was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but I needed to look him in the eye and hear him admit what he had been doing. I found him at his usual spot, a barber shop on Crenshaw that served as an unofficial headquarters for the set. When I walked in, he smiled like nothing had changed. "Ghost, you ready to handle that business we talked about?" I looked around the shop at the other members, guys I had considered brothers, guys I had bled with and killed for. "I need to talk to you privately," I said. We went to the back room, and I closed the door behind us. "I know what you've been doing," I told him. "I know about Jerome, about the others. You've been using me to clean up your messes." For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw the cold calculation in his eyes. Then he smiled again. "Ghost, you're paranoid, homie. The stress is getting to you. Maybe you do need that vacation." But I pressed on. "How many innocent people have I killed for you? How many Rolling 60s members have you had me eliminate because they were asking too many questions?" That's when he dropped the act entirely. "You think this is a democracy?" he snarled. You think we vote on who lives and dies? I built this set, I run this set, and I protect this set by any means necessary. You're a soldier, Ghost. Soldiers follow orders. They don't ask questions. Looking at Big Mike in that moment, I saw him for what he really was. Not a leader, not a brother, but a predator who used young men like me as weapons in his personal war for power and money. I'm done, I told him. I'm out. The silence that followed was deafening. In the gang world, those words are essentially a death sentence. You don't quit the rolling 60s. You don't walk away from being a shooter. Big Mike's hand moved toward his waistband, where I knew he kept his gun. You know I can't let you just walk away, he said quietly. You know too much. You've done too much. The only way out is in a body bag. I had anticipated this moment. My own gun was already in my hand, hidden behind my back. I figured you'd say that, I replied. But here's the thing. I'm not the same scared kid you jumped in 7 years ago. I'm the shooter you created, the killer you trained, and right now, I'm pointing my gun at you. The standoff lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Two killers, two men who had shed blood together, now ready to shed each other's blood. But I had one advantage. I had nothing left to lose. Big Mike still thought he was untouchable, still believed his own legend. That hesitation, that split second of disbelief, was all I needed. I won't go into details about what happened in that back room, but I will say this. Only one of us walked out alive, and it wasn't Big Mike. The sound of gunfire brought the other members running, but by then I was already gone, disappearing into the maze of alleys and side streets that I knew better than anyone. I had maybe an hour before word spread throughout South Central that Ghost had killed Big Mike, that I was now the most wanted man in rolling 60s territory. I went home one last time to get my grandmother. I couldn't leave her behind. They would use her to get to me. We have to go now, I told her, throwing clothes into a bag. We can never come back. She didn't ask questions. After 7 years of watching me live this life, she knew this day would come eventually. We drove through the night, heading north toward the program that had promised to help me disappear. Behind us, South Central was erupting in violence as different factions of the rolling 60s fought for control in the power vacuum left by Big Mike's death. I had started a war, but for the first time in years, it wasn't a war I was planning to fight. I was done being a soldier in someone else's army. I was done being Ghost. It was time to find out if Marcus was still alive somewhere inside the killer I had become. The transition program relocated us to a small town in Northern California, far from the gang territories of Los Angeles. They gave me a new identity, a new social security number, a new life story. On paper, I was no longer Ghost the rolling 60s shooter. I was Marcus Johnson, a construction worker with no criminal record. But changing your name doesn't change your memories. Every night, I was haunted by the faces of the people I had killed. Every loud noise made me reach for a gun that was no longer there. Every stranger on the street could be an enemy coming for revenge. The program provided counseling, job training, and most importantly, a community of other former gang members who understood what I was going through. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my humanity. I got a job working construction, honest work that left me exhausted but clean. I started attending church with my grandmother, not because I suddenly found religion, but because I needed to believe in the possibility of redemption. The hardest part wasn't learning to live without violence. It was learning to live with the weight of what I had done. Some nights, I would wake up screaming, reliving drive-bys in my dreams. Some days, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without seeing the blood on my hands. 3 years into my new life, I received news that shattered my fragile peace. My cousin Jerome, the one I had almost killed that night, had been murdered in a drive-by shooting. The war I had started by killing Big Mike had eventually claimed him anyway. I fell into a deep depression, consumed by guilt and rage. All my efforts to escape the violence had been meaningless. The streets had still taken my family. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I decided to go back to Los Angeles, not to rejoin the gang life, but to try to prevent other young people from making the same mistakes I had made. Working with community organizations and former gang members, I began speaking at school, telling my story to kids who were facing the same choices I had faced at 14. It was terrifying at first, returning to the city where I was still wanted dead by multiple gangs. But I realized that my story, as painful as it was to tell, might be the only thing that could save someone else's life. The first time I spoke to a group of at-risk youth, I saw myself in their eyes, the anger, the desperation, the need to belong somewhere. I told them about the 200 drive-bys, about the bodies, about the betrayal, about the price of choosing violence over everything else. Over the past 5 years, I've spoken to thousands of young people across California. I've shared my story in schools, community centers, juvenile detention facilities, and even in some of the same neighborhoods where I used to hunt enemies. The response has been overwhelming. Kids who were on the verge of joining gangs have changed their minds after hearing what the life really costs. Parents have reached out to thank me for helping them understand what their children were going through. Even some active gang members have approached me privately, asking for help getting out of the life. But the most meaningful moment came 2 years ago, when a young man approached me after a presentation in Compton. He was wearing blue, clearly affiliated with a Crips set, and I thought he might be there to confront me about my past. Instead, he thanked me. "My little brother was about to get jumped in," he said. "After hearing your story, he changed his mind. You saved his life." That's when I realized that all the pain, all the guilt, all the sleepless nights might actually serve a purpose. Every young person who chooses education over initiation, every family that stays together instead of being torn apart by gang violence, every life that's saved, that's my redemption. It doesn't erase what I did, but it gives meaning to my survival. If there's one thing I want you to understand from my story, it's this. The gang life is not what you see in movies or hear in music. It's not about loyalty, brotherhood, or respect. It's about powerful people using desperate young men as weapons in their personal wars for money and control. I thought I was a soldier fighting for my neighborhood, but I was really just a tool being used by someone who saw me as disposable. The family I thought I had found was willing to sacrifice me the moment I became inconvenient. The respect I thought I had earned was really just fear, and fear is not love. The money I made came at the cost of my soul, and no amount of cash is worth that price. I survived 200 drive-bys not because I was smart or tough or blessed. I survived because I was lucky, and luck runs out eventually. For every ghost who makes it out, there are 100 young men who don't. They die in the streets, they die in prison, or they die inside while their bodies keep walking around. The streets don't love you back. The gang doesn't care about your dreams, your family, or your future. You are nothing more than a trigger finger attached to a gun. And when that gun is no longer useful, you become a target yourself. To the parents watching this, especially the mothers and grandmothers who are fighting to keep their children off the streets, I see you. I was your child once, angry and lost and looking for somewhere to belong. My grandmother tried everything to save me, but I couldn't hear her voice over the noise of the streets. Don't give up. Keep praying, keep talking, keep showing them love, even when they push you away. Sometimes the seeds you plant don't grow until years later, but they do grow. Look for the warning signs. New friends you've never met, unexplained money or expensive items, changes in behavior or language, reluctance to go certain places or wear certain colors. If your child is already involved in gang activity, don't try to handle it alone. Reach out to community organizations, former gang members, anyone who can help you navigate this nightmare. Most importantly, don't blame yourself. The streets are designed to prey on our children's vulnerability, their need for belonging and purpose. You didn't fail as a parent. Society failed your child by not providing better alternatives. But there is hope. There are programs, people, and resources available to help. The key is acting quickly, before the streets claim another life. To the young people who might be considering gang involvement, or who are already in the life but having doubts, listen to me carefully. Everything the streets promise you is a lie. They promise you money, but most gang members live in poverty while their leaders get rich. They promise you respect, but respect earned through fear is not real respect. They promise you family, but they will sacrifice you the moment it benefits them. They promise you protection, but gang members are more likely to be victims of violence than anyone else. What they don't tell you is that there are real alternatives. There are job training programs, educational opportunities, mentorship programs, and legitimate ways to earn money and respect. There are communities of people who will support you without asking you to hurt others. There are paths to success that don't require you to carry a gun or look over your shoulder for the rest of your life. I know it's hard to believe when you're surrounded by poverty and violence, when it feels like the gang is the only option available. But I'm living proof that change is possible. I went from being one of the most feared shooters in South Central to being someone who helps save lives instead of taking them. If I can change, if I can find redemption after everything I've done, then anyone can. If you or someone you know needs help getting out of gang life, there are resources available. Organizations like Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, the Gang Intervention Program, and local community centers offer support, job training, and protection for people trying to leave the streets. Many cities have former gang members who work as intervention specialists, people who understand the life because they've lived it. Don't try to leave alone. It's dangerous and often impossible without support. Reach out to churches, community organizations, school counselors, or social work. There are people who want to help, who understand what you're going through, and who can provide the resources you need to build a new life. For families dealing with gang involvement, organizations like Mothers Against Gang Violence and community-based intervention programs can provide guidance and support. Remember, leaving gang life is not just about walking away. It's about rebuilding your entire identity, learning new skills, and finding new communities. It takes time, support, and tremendous courage, but it is possible. I'm proof of that. And so are thousands of other former gang members who have chosen life over death, hope over despair, building over destroying. As I sit here today, 15 years removed from my last drive-by shooting, I think about the man I used to be and the man I've become. Ghost was a killer, a weapon, a tool of destruction who left nothing but pain in his wake. Marcus is a builder, a healer, someone who tries to create rather than destroy. The transformation wasn't easy, and it's not complete. I still carry the weight of what I did, and I always will. But I've learned that redemption isn't about forgetting your past or pretending it didn't happen. It's about using your experience, no matter how dark, to create something positive in the world. Every young person I reach, every family I help, every life that's saved because someone heard my story and made a different choice. That's how I honor the memory of the people I hurt. I can't bring back the lives I took, but I can work to ensure that fewer lives are lost to the same violence that consumed me for so many years. The streets taught me how to destroy, but life taught me how to build. The gang gave me a gun, but my grandmother gave me love. The set made me a killer, but my community helped me become a healer. The work I do now, speaking to young people, isn't just about preventing gang involvement. It's about showing them that their past doesn't have to define their future. I meet kids who have already made mistakes, who think they're too far gone to change, who believe that violence is their only option. I tell them about the 200 drive-bys, about the blood on my hands, about the darkness I lived in for 12 years. And then I tell them about the light I found, about the possibility of redemption, about the life I've built since leaving the streets. Some of them listen, some of them don't. Some make the change immediately, others take years to find their way. But every single person who chooses a different path, every family that stays together, every young man who picks up a book instead of a gun, that's a victory against the forces that tried to destroy us all. The gang leaders who use children as soldiers, the drug dealers who poison communities, the systems that fail our young people, they want us to believe that change is impossible, that once you're in the life, you're trapped forever. But we prove them wrong every day. One story at a time, one life at a time, one choice at a time. Before I finish my story, I need something from you. If this video has impacted you in any way, if it's made you think differently about gang life, about violence, about the choices we make, I need you to share it. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a young person in your family who's struggling with these choices. Maybe it's a parent who's trying to understand what their child is going through. Maybe it's a community leader who's looking for ways to address gang violence. Your share could save a life. Your comment could reach someone who's feeling hopeless. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to hear that change is possible. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. Whether you agree with everything I've said or not, whether my story resonates with you or challenges you, I want to know. This conversation doesn't end when the video stops. It continues in the comments, in the discussions you have with your families, in the choices you make going forward. So please, take a moment right now to engage with this content. Your voice matters, your story matters, and together we can create change. To anyone watching this who is currently living the life I used to live, who is trapped in a cycle of violence and feels like there's no way out, I want you to know that you are not defined by your worst moments. You are not condemned to repeat the same patterns forever. You are not too far gone to change. I was Ghost, the rolling 60s shooter who participated in 200 drive-bys, who killed people for money and respect, who was willing to murder my own cousin for a man who saw me as disposable. If I can find redemption, if I can build a life worth living, if I can use my story to help others instead of hurt them, then so can you. It won't be easy. It will require courage, support, and a willingness to face the pain you've caused and the pain you've experienced. But it is possible. There are people waiting to help you, communities ready to embrace you, and a future that's brighter than anything the streets can offer. The first step is believing that you deserve better, that your life has value beyond what you can do for a gang, that you are more than the worst things you've done. The second step is reaching out for help. The third step is taking action, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. My name is Marcus, but for 12 years I was known as Ghost, a name that represented death, violence, and destruction. Today I choose to be known as someone who brings life, hope, and healing. This is my story, my testimony, and my warning. The streets will promise you everything and deliver nothing but pain. The gang life will take everything you love and leave you with nothing but regret. But there is another way. There is hope, and there is help available for anyone brave enough to reach for it. If this video has impacted you, please don't just watch and move on. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts, your story, or your questions, whether you agree with me or not, whether my story inspires you or challenges you. I want to hear from you. Your engagement helps this message reach more people, and your voice adds to the conversation that can save lives. Remember, every choice you make matters. Every day is a chance to choose differently, and every person has the power to change their story. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for being part of the solution. Stay strong, stay safe, and never give up hope.